Welcome to CKLA Knowledge 10, Lesson 11, Liberty and Justice for All. Let's take a break here and ask a question. What are the names of the founding fathers you have heard stories about so far? Do you know who this is? George Washington. Who's this? Benjamin Franklin. And who is this? Thomas Jefferson. Great job! We have already heard a lot of big words in this domain, and in today's read aloud, you are going to hear more words that may be unfamiliar. Two of these words are very important to our country, our nation, and the United States. One of these words is liberty. Liberty means freedom. The war against Great Britain was fought so that the Americans could be free citizens, able to make their own laws. Say the word liberty. Liberty means freedom. Our next word is justice. Justice means treating others fairly. The war was fought in part to ensure that the laws they made were fair for everyone. Say the word justice. Justice means fairness. Liberty and justice are the same as freedom and fairness. Our purpose for listening today is to think about the words liberty and justice as you listen to the read aloud. Today, we will talk about how some groups were not given freedom and fairness when the United States was a new country. We also want to understand the word equally. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Where have you heard those words before? Listen again and see if you remember who wrote these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Who wrote those important words? I'm going to give you a hint. He was a founding father and wonderful writer. He lived in Monticello, and he became the third president. Were you thinking Thomas Jefferson? Thomas Jefferson wrote them as a part of our Declaration of Independence. Remember how the founders felt that they were being treated unfairly by the British? They did not feel that they were being treated equally or the same as the British on the other side of the ocean. The colonists wanted liberty or freedom, to be free from the rules of the British. And so when Jefferson sat down to write these famous words, he wanted to make sure that the new American nation would treat its people fairly. Again, when our founders met to write our Constitution of the United States, they wrote about liberty and justice. Justice means fairness. So when they were writing about freedom and fairness, they wrote about liberty and justice. When we hold our hand over our hearts and pledge of allegiance to our country, our final words are with liberty and justice for all. These are important words written by our founders, but not all people were treated fairly in the American colonies. Let's look back at the 1700s, during and after the war, when the founders were busy writing these important words. Whom did they mean by we when they wrote the Constitution, we the people of the United States? Some people say they must have been thinking about themselves, a group of white men who made the laws of the land. Were they forgetting the other people on the continent? Native Americans who had lived there the longest? Women and enslaved Africans? These were very smart men, writing words that they knew would be read and reread by others for many years to come. They were writing for the future. Nevertheless, it is true that not everyone in colonial times was treated equally. And even today, people are still seeking liberty and justice for all. During the Revolutionary War, women had different roles than they have today. Although today many women serve in our military and help protect us by fighting in wars, this wasn't the case during the Revolutionary War. Some women wanted to be soldiers, but they were not allowed to join the army. We know that some women actually disguised themselves by dressing like men so they could fight alongside them. One of the most famous of these women was Deborah Sampson, who fought in the war under the name Robert Shirtliff. Women were also not allowed to vote. And in fact, all women did not receive the right to vote in America for nearly 150 years after the Constitution was written. Remember, one reason that the war was fought was because the colonists felt it was unfair that they could not vote in the British Parliament, and yet women were not able to vote in their own land. Was that liberty and justice for all? There were many people from Africa who were brought to America and enslaved by the colonists. When the colonists decided to fight for their freedom from Great Britain, they themselves were keeping freedom from a large number of Africans by enslaving them. These Africans did not have the freedom to choose how to live their own lives. Enslaved Africans were also not allowed to vote. Was that liberty and justice for all? For a long time, Native Americans lived on the North American continent alone. Yet life for them began changing when the first European explorers arrived hundreds of years before the Revolutionary War. You will remember that some of them chose to help the colonists and trade with them when they first arrived. However, it wasn't long before the colonists started exploring lands to the west, pushing the Native Americans off their land. Native Americans were also not allowed to vote. Was that liberty and justice for all? So what do you think? Was the decision of our nation's founders to fight a 6-year war for independence a wise decision? It probably was. The government they set up 200 years ago has served as a model for the rest of the world ever since. It was certainly not fair to all people in the early years, and there are still many ways in which it can be improved. But it is up to us, we the people, to make each day a better day for all of us. Next time, we will learn about some United States symbols and what they have in common.